On May 22, 2021, 172 runners set off on a race that wound through the hills and valleys of the Yellow River Stone Forest National Geological Area in China. It was cold, the sky was overcast, and the road ahead was long. They were about to run a 62-mile ultramarathon. They knew it was going to be tough, that their bodies would beg them to stop. Maybe some doubted whether they'd make it to the end, but no one could have imagined how it would actually end. With no one reaching the finish line, and 1 in every 8 competitors dead along the way. An ultramarathon is any race longer than a standard marathon, which measures 26.2 miles. Most go beyond 31 miles, but many stretch far past that. There are races that last for days, covering hundreds of miles. Besides the massive distances, ultramarathons usually take place in harsh environments: mountains, deserts, areas where runners must cross rivers or climb over rocks. The Gansu Ultramarathon route, held every year in China since 2018, was considered demanding, but not extreme. It covered 62 miles across the dry, rocky landscape of the Yellow River Stone Forest. For almost the entire route, there wasn't a single tree, and the terrain was completely exposed. In some sections, runners had to use their hands to climb steep slopes or make their way over loose rocks. Given the distance and terrain, most runners were expected to take at least 20 hours to finish. Those who reached the finish line would receive a reward of 1,600 yuan, about $250 at the time. Along the route, there were several checkpoints where runners could stop, rest, or get some food or water. At checkpoint 6, for example, there was a station with first aid, spare clothes, and supplies. At others, though, there were just a couple of crates of bottled water and nothing else. A total of 172 people had signed up, both professional and amateur runners. The only requirement was to have completed at least one similar ultramarathon before. Many had done several, and some dozens. Among the best known was 31-year-old Liang Jing, nicknamed General Liang, for his experience and leadership in the circuit. He had won several tough ultramarathons, including one in the Gobi Desert in 2018. Another favourite was 34-year-old Huang Guanjun, who had won the marathon at the 2019 National Paralympic Games in China. After a medical accident as a child, he had hearing problems and couldn't speak, but he was an exceptional long-distance runner. Most participants arrived at the site 1 or 2 days before the race. They stayed in small villages near the entrance to the geological area, through which the course passed. The days leading up to the race were perfect. Warm, clear skies, mild sun, and no wind. It seemed like ideal running weather. Almost everyone had packed an extra layer of warm clothing and supplies in a bag that would be transported to checkpoint 6, so they could pick it up halfway through the race if needed. Because the weather had been so nice, most decided to leave their thermal or waterproof gear in that bag. The only mandatory item was a compact emergency blanket, just in case. Organisers also gave each runner a GPS device with an emergency button. Nobody thought they'd ever need to use it. But on race day, May 22nd, the weather changed suddenly. The morning was much colder. When the runners gathered at the starting line wearing shorts and light shirts, many were already shivering. Still, it didn't seem serious. They trusted that their bodies would warm up after the first few miles. The organisers hadn't mentioned any risk of storms or bad weather. The air was cold, yes, but the atmosphere was filled with excitement. At 9 a.m, the race began. The temperature hovered around 7 degrees Celsius, about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. As the runners climbed the hills and passed the first 2 checkpoints, the cold grew more intense. With the wind chill dropped close to freezing. It started to drizzle, then sleet. Fog rolled in, and gusts of wind battered the runners on the fully exposed path. The section between checkpoints 2 and 3 was the steepest and most exposed. When the first runners reached it, the wind and rain were brutal, making it hard to see or move forward. Many of the trail markers had blown away, and there was no staff stationed there to guide them. They were completely alone. As the cold worsened and the weather deteriorated, some decided to turn back. Others pressed on, hoping the wind would ease later. But the farther they went, the worse things got. At 11:50 a.m, the first runner pressed the emergency GPS button to call for help. Nobody responded. Around the same time, others began sending messages on their phones asking for rescue. There was a WeChat group where participants shared photos and updates, but in that stretch there was no signal. Nobody knew that. Neither the organisers nor the runners. Those in the most danger couldn't communicate. The situation was desperate. Some tried to wrap themselves in their thermal blankets, but the wind tore them away or shredded them. And even when they managed to hold on to them, the thin metallic sheet wasn't enough to protect them from the cold and freezing rain. Several took shelter behind rocks or in small caves. Some huddled together for warmth, others exhausted, fainted or lost consciousness from hypothermia. The organisers had hired a private company called Blue Sky Rescue to assist runners in trouble during the race. But the company was prepared to rescue 1 or 2 injured runners, not dozens of people in danger at once. The rescue team climbed the trail and managed to bring down 18 runners, but many more still needed help. Overwhelmed, they called for reinforcements from firefighters and emergency services. As rescuers made their way up the mountain, a local shepherd named Ju Kemming came across several runners in terrible shape. He had been out working despite the bad weather, tending to his sheep, when he encountered a group of strangers in shorts and t-shirts, many showing signs of hypothermia. Ju led 6 of them to a cave he often used for shelter, lit a fire, and went back out to look for more people. The next 3 he found were already dead. He had to stay sheltered for a few hours until the weather eased, and as soon as he could, he went down the mountain until he got a cell signal. He called a contact in the nearest village, Changsheng. The villagers had already heard that something strange was happening in the hills, but they'd been told that only food supplies were needed. Thanks to Ju's warning, they realised people were in real danger. Within hours, about 50 villagers climbed up with blankets and food, reaching checkpoint 3, an hour before the official rescue teams. Knowing the terrain better, the locals moved quickly and even helped the firefighters, who, despite having better equipment, kept getting lost in the fog and steep slopes. By the next day, the rescue operation was over. The final toll was devastating. 21 runners dead and many hospitalised. Only 4 had made it to checkpoint 4. The rest had turned back, gotten stranded, or didn't survive. Among the victims were both amateurs and professionals. Even Liang Jing and Huang Guanjun, with all their experience and fitness, died of hypothermia on the mountain. After the tragedy, the criticism was fierce. There had been no emergency plan, no staff in the most isolated areas, and no protocol for sudden weather changes. The runners hadn't even been required to carry enough gear to survive the cold. The race had been organised by the local government, with support from the National Geological Area, and the logistics handled by a sports marketing company. While the government focused on promoting the region and boosting local development, nobody had planned what to do if the weather spiralled out of control. 5 people involved in organising the event were charged with negligence and sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. In addition, all sporting events without national safety standards were suspended until new regulations were established. Eventually, those rules came. Safety standards were defined for ultramarathons in China and many other countries. Since then, organisers have been required to prepare for extreme conditions and to ensure every participant carries basic survival gear. Thanks to that, marathons and ultramarathons have regained popularity. Today, dozens take place across the country, each one marked, even if silently, by the tragedy of the 2021 Gansu Ultramarathon.